Take notes. The Renaissance thinkers were influenced by the Greek philosophers like Aristotle and Ptolemy, who created rationalism, and this is the belief that common sense and logic will explain all that you see. Fast forward to 1543. A man got these teachings from the 2nd century. Greek said that the sun wasn't the center of the universe, it was Earth. This is known as the geocentric theory. This Prussian scientist named Copernicus said heliocentric planets went around it. It was an intriguing notion. So the German Johann Kepler observed the planetary motion. He saw the planet's orbit, sun, and oval revolutions. But get those Greek ideas, homie, this is a revolution. And here's the resolution. Aristotle was right. Psych! Aristotle got it wrong.
Can you give us some background information on yourself?
Sure. My name is, unknown first name, Copernicus. I'm a man who at some point grew my hair out long. I was born in 1473, and I lived for 70 long years. I was the youngest of 4 children, but sadly my very wealthy father died when I was only 10, and I went to live with my mother's uncle, Lucas Watson Road.
Can you tell us more about your very wealthy uncle?
Well, sure. As I mentioned, he was very wealthy. So I think common sense would dictate that he was very successful as well. He was a cleric. He became Bishop of Warmia in 1489, and he had a lot to do with my education and my advancement in the church.
What did your education exactly include?
It included a lot of things. I went to the University of Krakow. They offered courses in math, astronomy, astrology, and my interest was sparked. Then Watson Road arranged my election as a canon of the chapter in the cathedral chapter of Warmia. In the meantime, I went to the University of Bologna in 1496 to study canon law. While there, I lived with an astronomy professor and made my first observations. I ended up leaving Bologna in 1501 without having obtained my degree. I then took a leave of absence to go study medicine. I also did not receive that degree. Instead, I went to a different university from which I did obtain a doctorate in canon law.
Did you go back to your chapter after you obtained your degree?
No.
Why didn't you finish your degree in medicine?
Honestly, I thought it was really boring. It would have taken 3 years, actually, and I had only been granted a 2-year leave of absence by my chapter.
When did you really start pursuing your career as an astronomer?
I began working on astronomy on my own. I was interested in it from the time I enrolled in the University of Krakow. I wrote an essay sometime around 1512 that has come to be known as the Commentariolus that introduced my new cosmological idea, the heliocentric universe, as you watched in that great rap video that I showed earlier. Then a young mathematician named George came to study with me. Copernicus brought me books in mathematics and published an introduction to my ideas, the Narratio Primo. Most importantly, he convinced me to publish on the revolutions on astronomy.
Let's get into more of your theology and discoveries. So, what was the common belief before you?
Well, as also stated in the rap video, Aristotle had believed that there were 4 physical elements: earth, water, air, and fire, and the earth was in the center of the universe. That's basically it.
Did any astronomers think differently?
Actually, yes. Even though a lot of Greeks followed Aristotle because he was a pretty smart dude, not everyone followed this geocentric system. Pythagoreans, I would guess also Pythagorean theorem was named after these guys, suggested that the earth moved around a central point. However, it was not the sun at this time. Archimedes wrote the Aristarchus actually proposed that the Earth rotated daily and revolved around the sun. Islamic world was the center of astronomical thought and activity. During the 9th century, several aspects of Ptolemy's solar theory were recalculated. In the 10th and 11th century, an astronomer wrote a scathing critique of Ptolemy.
Can you explain your book Copernicus?
That was my first heliocentric writing. Oh, I loved it like it was a small child of mine. It was a small manuscript that was circulated but never printed. I don't know when I wrote this, but a professor in Krakow cataloged my books in 1514 and made reference to a manuscript of 6 leaves expounding the theory of an author who asserts that the earth moves while the sun stands still. Thus, I probably adopted the theory sometime between 1508 and 1514. I built my own outdoor observatory in 1513. Most scholars believe that the reason I rejected Ptolemaic cosmology was because of Ptolemy's equant. They assume this because of what I wrote in the Copernicus. I maintain that while the initial motivation for me was dissatisfaction with the equant, that dissatisfaction compelled me to observe other violations of uniform circular motion. And those observations, not the rejection of the equant by itself, led to the heliocentric theory. I'm no dummy. I arrived at the heliocentric theory by a careful analysis of planetary models. And as far as is known, I'm the only person of my age, 500 years old, to have done this. And if I chose to adopt it, I did so on the basis of careful analysis. In the Copernicus, I listed assumptions that I believed solved the problems of ancient astronomy. Basically, the work dealt with the order of the planets, the triple motion of the Earth that causes the sun to seem to be in motion, the motion of the equinoxes, the revolution of the moon around the Earth, and the revolution of the 5 planets around the sun. Kind of a common day in preschool nowadays.
Let's move on to your other famous script, On the Revolutions.
Yes, let's. Okay.
That means you.
The manuscript of On the Revolutions was completed when Rheticus came to visit me in 1539, and it was 6 books. The first book is the best known and discussed what is now known as the Copernican theory, and my most important contribution to astronomy, although there are many, many. The heliocentric universe.
What was the Narrato Prima?
Well, I can tell you're no scholar of Latin, my friend. That would be the Narratio Prima. So, it was the arrival of George Joachim Rheticus in Frombork that solved my needs for a supportive and stimulating colleague in math and astronomy. Rheticus was a professor of mathematics at the University of Wittenberg. In 1538, he took a leave of absence to visit several famous scholars in the field of astronomy. Obviously, I was one of them. Rheticus was particularly interested in showing me the work of Nuremberg publisher Petrus as a possible publisher of my volume. Rheticus wrote the Narratio Prima in 1539, which was an introduction to my theories, which was then published and circulated. That kind of jump-started the rest of my amazing career.
Quite confident. Explain to us the printing of On the Revelations.
It's Revolutions, not Revelations.
I'm pretty sure it says Revelations.
I believe that's a typo in your brain. But anyways, On the Revolutions, it was pretty good, and it was printed. So.
Oh wow, it's alright. What were the reactions to your work?
My book made its way across Europe over the next 50 years. The majority of astronomers thought eliminating the equant was my big achievement. While Martin Luther may have made negative comments about Copernicus, that's me. So because the idea of the heliocentric universe seems to contradict the Bible. But Philip Melanchthon, who presided over the curriculum at the University of Wittenberg, eventually accepted the importance of teaching my ideas. I don't like it that the church felt like my work went against the Bible, when in fact it was the church traditions that said something that the Bible wasn't necessarily saying.
I see.
I maintain I am not a heretic. I repeat, my theories are not heresy.
How did you produce a heliocentric theory?
Very carefully. I was disturbed by the failure of Ptolemy's geocentric model of the universe that followed Aristotle's requirement for the uniform circular motion of all celestial bodies. I really decided that I could achieve my goal of throwing that out the window through a heliocentric model.
Did you produce your theory alone?
Well, no, as the Bible itself says, nothing is new under the sun. Mine was not a brand new idea. A sun-centered solar system had been proposed as early as maybe 200 BC by Aristarchus of Samos. That's an island off the coast of what now is Turkey. Aristarchus proposed that the Earth rotated on something that orbited around the sun, but a lot of those writings were unfortunately lost. So it was not an original theory, and I did originally give credit to Aristarchus in my heliocentric treatise De Revolutionibus Caelestibus, where I wrote, Philos believed in the mobility of the earth, and some even say that Aristarchus of Samos was of that opinion. Interestingly, my editor crossed out this passage shortly before publication, maybe because he decided my treatise would stand on its own merit. I am Copernicus, out.